But it's really, really not true, because all of these are on the human plane, right? We have this spirituality. Look, there's a reason why billions of people in the world believe in religions and through the ages. And again, I always say, we're so fortunate. Look, we're really, really fortunate. In these 12 steps, which are right here, the people who compiled this, Bill Wilson and all the first 100 people, they were really, like we come in here, very desperate. But they had the ability to encompass. I'm telling you, in the first 166 pages of this big book, and in these 12 steps, are all the major philosophies and religions and all the things, it's just the ancient Greek, the Eastern, Western philosophies. They even talk here in step 11 about prayer and meditation. I have something to say about that quickly with the meditation, So here I get centered and I meditate. But the faith is an amazing thing. Just a little bit of faith. It can change your life. But again, it tells us we had faith all the time. So if somebody says, look, I believe in myself, I don't have faith. No, they had faith. They were worshiping the material things, more success, more money, people liking us. When we have that faith in this higher consciousness, which is our real source, this higher consciousness was in here. And again, we're children of that way. But we have the intellect and we misuse it. We misuse it. Self-will run riot, as it says on page 62. We misuse it to do all of this craziness in our lives and to react on the physical plane. That's why he talks about being rocketed into the fourth dimension. What does that mean? The fourth dimension means getting out of the five senses, the seeing, the hearing, the taste, and the smell. It's all related, again, going back to our addiction, and I'm going to mention that from time to time, and I always mention especially the food. Because here we're addicted to our higher consciousness, and our higher power is the food. And, it's really, in this society, it's so disastrous because, we got to realize that we're brainwashed by the corporations and the money and all of this poison they put in the foods and the oil and the sugar, which are tremendous amount of calories to get us addicted. We have drug pushes every time we turn on the TV, every time we're on the internet, driving down the street. So wherever we are, and boy, they put this stuff in to make us super, super addictive. And that's the white sugar, processed food. And again, I always say a lot of people who I work in this program with who've been addicted to alcohol and drugs and white powder, cocaine, heroin, whatever it is, crack, cocaine, they say this is really, really a tough one. And how, what can you do? It's like cigarette smoking was in the 50s. They advertised in the 60s, and even the medical profession did. So we realized, and the whole premise of this whole thing was when Dr. Silkwood said, even the scientists and the medicine men of the day, the medical people community, could not heal these addicted people. And they said there had to be a spiritual solution. So we're saying here the answer to all our problems. And the fear prayer, and this third step prayer, which I just read, I don't even realize I finished it or not, but it says, relieve me of bondage to self. Okay, that's the problem. I always start the meeting saying, Bob is the problem. Once we get that understanding, and it's just amazing, everything will open up. Because everything, it's like this. When you're upset or you're depressed during the day, what are you thinking about? You're thinking of the self. Now that's okay, but to realize it says in our book, The Truth from the False. Anytime I'm irritable, upset, anxious, and I was talking about fear and anxiety, I realize it's not true. Because I'm coming from a point of view of the self. Now let me give you an example. Do you realize there's some people who bungee jump, or they parachute, or they go to scary movies? They love that fear feeling. It invigorates them, right? But no, we catastrophically think about it. Oh, I'm getting fearful now. And, it's nothing to fear but fear itself. So, nothing, and this is a quote from Shakespeare, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So this whole perception change, a spiritual awakening could be possible right now. But again, I always say this is a simple, simple program. But the way we're brought up in this material age, again, everything material, new computer, new car, it's all a low-hanging fruit. I work with somebody who was from a very poor country, right? And it was a technician, and she said when she came here, she saw people running around like, a carrot on a stick, crazy over all of these crazy little things every day. So in the poor country, they pick up the spirituality. Like they say, it's harder for a rich man to get the grace of a higher power than it is for a person who doesn't have all these means. I mean, when we're into the food and all of these things, that becomes our higher power. But again, those are momentary pleasures. Getting people to like us, the food, the addicted drugs, the alcohol, all of these are pleasure. And on the other side of pleasure is just as much pain. Because when we have pleasure, we relate to that, and then when it's gone, we're upset. But if we want the ultimate bliss, joy, and happiness, this steps in this program, which again, somebody may say, hey, you go to AA, it's a cult. But all of these, when you read these 12 steps, you read this big book, it's all based on the major religions, Eastern, Western philosophies, the ancient Greek philosophies, all of it is mentioned in here, and they put it into an instruction booklet for us. Because, it even says in this book throughout it, it says a lot of people who considered them very religious people, they practiced their religion, came into here, and they felt that they were very religious, but yet they didn't have that sense. Which, because how many, there are people in this program 10, 20, 30, 40 years who just can't accept, when you hear them talk and sharing what they have to say, did they accept step one, we admitted we were powerless? When I, try to figure my problems out, when I get quiet and meditate, the answer to my problem is, you won't believe what it usually is. It's usually that I don't have any problems. It isn't a problem to begin with. Because, you could have 10 people in a room, and 10 of them will all have different opinions. Or something you're upset about, you could tell 10 people, and they shrug their shoulders and say, why? Because we're like a puppet on a string. We're going through life, and we don't want to be reborn in spirit. This program is getting rid of the old self. The old self is really like the devil, or it's the lower levels of thinking, because it's related to the self. The self, okay, it's called the flight or fright response. The flight or fright response is for, somebody put a gun to your head, or you're in the wilderness and a wild animal's going to attack you. But we got to use it for, we walk out of the house, somebody looks at us the wrong way, something happened in our mind. We have, page 62 talks about these illusions of the mind, and we go into the past. The past could be an illusion. What does the past have to do with anything? What is let's take it to the extreme. What does our own death have to do with anything? When we get out of the self and we're not in the self anymore, it's not about us. We're just a bunch of chemicals in our brain that have this response, the ego. The ego is always coming in with self-centered fear. I said this is fear and anxiety. The alarms are going off in our head, but for no reason. It's all because it's all self-made. Our problems are our own making. That's the other phrase I have, and that's written throughout the book. It's on page 62 and 103. It says, our problems of our own making. Right? Our problems of our own making. So, we can't resolve our problems because we're the ones who created them. But we have to get out of that old self. But the thing is, there is basically two sides to us. There's the human side, and go out and enjoy life and do everything. But these are the momentary pleasures. Just like the food addiction is. It's a momentary pleasure, but look what it causes, all the devastation, the diseases and illnesses. But the better perception, when we get centered, okay, take food again, is our body is God's temple, and we start to have that perception change. We start to see things differently. We start to see, and I always bring up the thing with the water, it's just, this is a natural thing. To me, if anybody wants to know, basically, the food I eat is one ingredient. Because I know that the corporations, they put in, you pick up a package that has 50 ingredients, 49 of the 50 are poison. They put in there preservative, and all the oil, the sugar, and all these synthetic sugars, their calories make it 3 times the amount of calories. They're also poison, but the fact is that natural things from the ground is basically what I do if anybody's interested, because this is the perception change. See, the whole thing is, I know I'm going all over the place, but this is very, very important. The diets don't work. The diets don't work. They're trying to figure it out, brings us into fear. The fear is with the diets too. If I have to eat a certain diet, and if I don't, I get upset. The thing is the design for living with the diets, with the food, with our alcohol, with our drugs, with people. It's that perception change. That's why step 12 says having had that spiritual awakening. But no, we'll go to the death. The ego doesn't want to die. To accept step 1, read step 1. We were powerless. We were powerless. Step 1 alone. People don't want, they go through this program. You could just tell the first sentence they say, they don't feel they're powerless. They feel that they can control. If they talk to enough people, if they analyze it, if they have a room full of self-help books, and yeah, look, the whole story is this, and I want to relate this to what I'm saying now because it's better explained than I can in the book. If we go to page 68, okay, on page 68, this is Roland Hazard, right? How much more explicit can it be than this? I'm trying to explain it, but but here it explains here. Okay, well, I'm sorry, I said 68. Let me see here. I'm sorry, it's on page 20. I'm going wrong here. 28, 26. Okay, 26. And again, for some reason, they call this chapter "There is a Solution." Again, to solve all our problems, and there is a solution. Believe me when I tell you these things are possible. The 9-step promises, getting rid of fear of economic and people and all of these things it says there. It's really true. But anyway, on page 26, Roland Hazard goes all the way over to Europe. Back then, it was in the 30s, maybe late 20s, I don't know, but it was a journey. And at that time, they started with the psychoanalysis, trying to figure all this stuff out, the complications of the mind and analyzing it, right? So what happened was, but Freud, it's really a true story. Freud was busy. He wanted to get the best. He was from a wealthy family. So Roland goes over there, and he finally settles for Dr. Jung. And Dr. Jung was friends with Freud, and he was very popular then. So he went through all the therapy, and he did all the analyzation. And he even says on page 26, in the middle of the first paragraph, or the end, he said, above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden spring. So here he is, Roland Hazard had it all figured out. Like, this is how we run our lives. We try to figure it out through self-will, through the ego, through the self, the intelligence. That relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could not give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So isn't this the way we run our lives? How many times? 95% of the times with dieting fails. 95% of the time we try to get people to like us. We become more ingratiating. We try to, or in other times we become more assertive. We tell them how we feel. You know what the solution to this whole thing is? Well, Roland Hazard figured it out here, and the steps tells us. He says, but the doctor said, he finally pleaded with the doctor, and he said, is there no help? And the doctor said, people of your type, just like we are here, just like we have 95% of the time, we can't fulfill our expectations with the food and our addiction to that and our other addictions to people. We just can't. We're miserable. We go through our lives like that. So here is the answer. This book gives you the answer almost in every page, every paragraph. So Dr. Jung said, okay, so on page 27, the doctor said, you have, on the second paragraph, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. So we have the mind of a chronic overeater. We have the mind of a chronic wanting people to like us, wanting to go to control life, chronic anxiety and depression, right? Okay, but we have an answer here. By the end of the meeting, you don't have much time. Let's get the answer here for the first time. I used to read this stuff a million times, went to a million meetings, sponsored a million people, did a million different things, but I never really took this into my heart. These steps in this program tell you it's not just AA, it's the philosophy and the religious philosophy of the world, and there's a reason why they all do this. So, I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed in on him with a clang. So all the years, in the doctor's opinion, the doctor realized there, and here Dr. Jung realizes that no matter what, they can't help this man. We are beyond hope with all our addictions, and we know this because every day we go back to we talked about fear, the anxiety, the depression, all of this craziness, but we have a solution here. So here's what happened. Yes, replied, he said to the doctor, is there no explanation? So here is this is the chapter's name. There is a solution. If anybody could tell me why, I'd want to know. But it tells us right here. So how many times I read this chapter, there's a solution, and I didn't realize there is a solution. It's how crazy our mind is. So here it goes. Here and there, here it is. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have what we call vital spiritual experiences. This steps in this program, Step 12, promises, having done these steps, we'll have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. But did somebody tells me, hey, I did the step 5 times, I didn't have a spiritual experience. Because they did it from here, the intellect. Still trying to figure out, analyzing it. What is step, I told you about step 1, admitted we were powerless. But what does step 2 say? It says we can't figure it out. We came to believe a power greater than ourselves, greater than our ego, our finite. That power is in us all the time. We are creating God's image. We buried it with all the nonsense and the ego and the self. Made it, so step 3 says made a decision to turn our will and our lives over the care of God as we understood him. So it's just what it says here. Had vital spiritual experiences on page 27. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. So I had to admit that I was crazy when I came in here, that I was powerless. If you don't admit that, where the problem is, you can't solve it. But all the time, I'm the problem. I was always trying to solve it. Here's a chance to be reborn. It talks about that in the 3rd step. To be reborn in thinking, to be transformed, to be out of this old self. And the soul, which is really the source. The soul has been there. This happiness, joyous, and this blissfulness is down in there. We bury it with our addictions and our thinking, and are addicted to ourselves. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That is we could read